Sometimes we need to celebrate the people who don't get much recognition in this world. The ones who put in 8 hours or more a day slaving away around the clock. The ones that the corporations rely on to operate smoothly and profitably, who carry the gambling industry on the back of their efforts. The ones who sacrifice family, friendships, relationships, just to go in and suffer daily verbal and emotional abuse from the patrons of the casinos. I'm talking, of course, about poker players. And that's why every year Las Vegas hosts a giant series of events called the World Series of Poker, where players from all over the globe effectively pay a bunch of money to flip coins for a shiny gold bracelet, and after 6 weeks, 99% go home sad, broke, and swearing off poker forever, which in most cases is about a week. Of all these events, obviously the most prestigious event is event number 1. It's number 1 for a reason, and I'm part of the exceptionally select few elites who even qualify to play in it. Day of the tournament, of course I sleep in. Maybe it was the weight and the importance of this first event that kept me up the night before. This year's WSOP is at a new location at Bally's. I park at Bellagio, which is right across from Bally's, because I'm a little nervous about how traffic might be over there. I get to the strip around 4:30, even though the event started at 11 a.m. A little late registration's not going to stop me. Alright, $500, casino employees only. Blinds are just about to hit $600, $1,200 for late registration, and we're starting with $25,000, so about 20 big blinds. Buckle up, guys, this is a long one. I want to cover just about every hand I played. We do a bunch of folding, and hand number 10 we pick up 7s in the hijack, but there's an under the gun open to 2800, and it's in this moment I realize I have no idea what I'm doing. It's been so long since I've even studied tournaments, let alone no limit hold'em, that I'm wondering why I even bothered to show up instead of sticking to PLO. I think you're supposed to play pretty tight in these things, and it's an under the gun open, so I just go ahead and fold the first playable hand I see. Hand number 15, we look down at 9-9 in the big blind. Cutoff comes in for an open to 2900, and it seems like a pretty straightforward jam here. I rip in about 20,000, and we're off to the races against Ace Queen. No worries, guys, not gonna be a short vlog for this one.
For the stakers!
One of the players at the table notices I'm recording and makes a remark that it must be for my backers, and I just play along with it.
You picked a good guy to put in this tournament. You doubled up.
Very next hand, I'm still stacking chips, but LoJack limps in, button raises to 2800, and I throw out a cold 3-bet to 10,000 with Ace Queen. Maybe 10,000's a bit big, but whatever. LoJack is a sneaky snake though, and he quickly does the old limp jam of 39,000. There's one re-entry allowed in this thing, and I'm willing, but I just really feel like this guy is only going to be playing ace king or queens or better this way. My table is 7 dealers. At this point, I feel like all the mega punchers are out of this tournament, and from what I've seen so far, this guy seems to be pretty tight prior to this hand. So I just dump it, and I don't feel too bad about my fold, though I feel a little bad about my 3-bet sizing. Hand 19, under the gun 2 limps in, and I bump it to 4,200 in the hijack with the old Jack 10 suited. Button and under the gun 2 both come along, and we go to a flop of Ace King King. I see bet 3,500 with my gutter. I think this will mostly be a one and done spot for me. Button comes along, and under the gun 2 folds. Turn is a king, and I'm just done here. There was no flush draws on the flop. Button should have a ton of ace-x when he peels 3-way, so I'm checking out of the hand. I check, and he checks back, and the river brings a 2. I mean, he could still have quad kings or something like that. Again, I just check here and give up, and he checks and wins with pocket 10s. So we hit our first break, and I'm here wishing I just registered near the end of the break instead of playing for an hour and then waiting on a 1-hour break. I'm basically at starting stack. Hands 24 and 25, I pick up some small pots in blind versus blind situations, And then hand 33, I look down at pocket 5s in the big blind, and defend when cutoff opens to 3,500. The board runs out king, queen, 6, 9, queen, and it checks to the river, where he bets 4k into 9,500. I should probably just fold here, as live players probably underbluff these spots, but I convince myself that he might have some ace highs he'll bluff, so I make a pretty bad call, and he shows me jack 9 suited. Oopsie. I'm back in the big blind on hand 42, and button opens to 4k, and I feel like ripping it in with ace 3 off. Here, it's not great, but if I'm being honest, I kind of just wanted to either double up here or go home and lie down for the rest of the night. My opponent calls with 8-8, and I'm not even sure who I'm rooting for here since I don't really even want to play tournaments. Flop is 10-10 jack, and I guess I was rooting for myself as I instantly call for the jack, and it comes counterfeiting his 8-8, so we double up and it looks like life goes on. Hand 46, I open and end up check folding 3 ways. And then hand 48, I raise 9s and I take down the blinds. Blinds have just gone up to 1k, 2k. We hit a bit of a dry streak, and I find an open with king 9 off on the button on hand 63. Big blind defends, and we throw out a 1/3 c-bet on a king high board to immediately take it down. Another under the gun open with ace jack that gets through on hand 68. Then I play my big blind and small blind for a very small chip movement a couple hands later. And then on hand 76, I open ace jack in middle position to 5,500, big blind defends. Flop comes queen 10-2. I fire a c-bet of 4,500 into 14,000 and he calls. Turn is a 3. This table's been playing pretty tight in ABC, so I don't think he peels a flop too often, so I just check back. River is a 6 and he checks again, and I think he could have some king jack, king 9 type stuff that I can still beat, and he doesn't seem necessarily like a player who would turn those hands into bluffs, so I check back and he shows queen jack. I think he definitely should have value bet that hand, but that's just sort of how this table has been playing. Pretty passive and pretty tight. Hand 79, I defend 9-5 of clubs in the big blind when cutoff opens to 4,500. Flop of 8-2-4 checks through, and the turn brings a 7 of clubs. Again, this table's been pretty straightforward and tight, so I figure I can just steal this pot with a bet here. So I fire 6k into 12k, and sure enough, he quickly folds. I take down the blinds on hand 91 with king queen in the cutoff, and then the next hand in the hijack, I make another tight fold with 7s when under the gun 1 opens to 6k. Everyone else folds, and he complains about how tight the table is, and he shows kings face up. So good fold us. Hand 97, we look down at ace 3 off in the big blind, and hijack and small blind limps, and I just check it back here. Hijack is the same guy who limp shoved when we 3-bet ace queen, so we're a little bit cautious this time around. The flop comes ace 5-8, and we check to the hijack who fires out 3,500, and only I call. Turn brings a 9 of hearts, and it goes check check. River brings a 5 of hearts, and I should probably go for value here, but I ended up checking, and he checks back and shows the limped king king. This makes us feel a lot better about our ace-queen fold earlier. Not to mention, some other guy at the table had called this guy a nit during this session, so we probably saved our tournament by practicing some discipline. Another hand in the big blind, hand 106. This is actually the last hand before the race off break. Button opens to 6k and we look down at ace 4 offsuit. Button's been pretty active this session, so I feel like I want to just shove and pray with 18 bigs. So I rip it in and he quickly folds and we go on break number 2. Back from the break and we hit another giant dry spell of cards before waking up with ace king on the button. Hijack opens to 8k and I happily shove in 12 bigs and we're up against ace queen. He begs the dealer for a queen and the dealer gives him what he asked for, but there's a king on the flop as well. This guy rudely asks for yet another queen. If you only ask for one, you're only gonna get one. Don't be greedy, man.
We got it in good, Staker.
We got it in good. We got it in good. Hand 130, we open king queen from undergun 1 and have to fold to a 3-bet. And then hand 132, we look down at 4-5 offsuit in the big blind. but we're priced into a call when button shoves only 4 big blinds. Not a very exciting race. Where was the sweat? The next 4 hands I play are all shoves. I shove ace-6 of clubs on the button to take it down, I shove ace-queen from middle position to take it down, and I shove 10-10 from undergun to once again take down the blinds. I pick up 9-9 from undergun, and blinds have gone up to 3k, 5k, so I still only have about 13 bigs. I shove it in, and everyone folds once again. Hand 159, I limp 6-7 of diamonds in the small blind in a blind versus blind spot, and big blind checks back. I flop huge with 8-4-3, 2 diamonds, and I bet 6k, and he raises here to 16k. There are 133 players left, and 125 make the money. I think shoving here is still probably fine, but this player is also a bit tight, so I decide to just call and see what the turn brings. The turn is a 7 of spades, and I check, and he checks back. River 6 of hearts, and I check, and he checks behind, and my 2 pair is good enough to beat his 8-2 offsuit. He asks if I would have folded if he bet big on the turn, and I tell him the truth that I wouldn't be folding even if he had jammed. The bubble pressure mounts as we're down to 126 on the exact bubble, and our table is one of the last ones to break before we are in the money. In the process of moving, the bubble actually does pop, and we're in the money. A very quick, painless bubble, and a bit anticlimactic if you ask me. But of course no one here is complaining about cashing. The whole room cheers when the floor announces that we've made it to 125 players.
All right, players, congratulations, you're all in the money. Yeah! Listen, players.
So, sucks to be that one guy who just busted and has to listen to everyone cheer. Hand 178, I'm bored because we just folded 18 hands in a row near the bubble, so I go for a button steal with king 7 offsuit and big blind defense. I completely whiff on a queen jack 6 flop, but I see bet 12k into 37k just cause we're a bit desperate for chips, and he folds. Hand 183, I open king 10 of spades, undergun 1, and middle position calls. Flop is ace jack 3, I have backdoor spades, and the small c-bets have been working out for me, so I fire 12k into 43,000 and she calls. Turn is a 6 of spades, which gives us a flush draw now. I think it's fine to barrel, especially for a large sizing, but this particular player feels like the type to peel pretty wide on flops and not be too aggressive. I go for what I consider to be generally a stupid sizing, but one I feel like might work exploitatively, and I bet 17k into 67,000. If she has an ace, I feel like she'll never fold to whatever sizing I use, but I also feel like she'll never raise an ace to a double barrel. If I check, I feel like I'm just giving her the initiative to take control of the sizings and bet large with an ace, and I hate checking just because I feel like there's a strong potential for fold equity with a double barrel. Anyways, it ends up working, and she makes the fold, which is what I was hoping for, but I'm still a little surprised by the result, given the odds I was laying her with my turn bet size. Hand 187, low jack opens to 15k, and hijack, who's a little bit tilted from just losing a huge pot, shoves all in for 42k. With 20 bigs and ace queen, I think we have a pretty standard shove, and the low jack gets out of the way. The tilted hijack shows 8-9, and unfortunately we lose the race, down to 75k chips. 2 hands later, we pick up king-king and undergun limps. We only have over 12 big blinds, and we really want action to give us a fighting chance for a deep run, so we bump it up to 22k instead of shoving. Now this might be an obvious sign to many players about my hand strength, but against someone who's limping under the gun at this stage, they'll probably not even think about it much and come along. Under the gun limper calls, and we see a flop of 10-9-4. We have one pot size bet, but again, exploitatively, I really want action, so I just see bet 18k, and he calls. Turn is a queen of clubs, and he checks, and I jam the rest in. And unfortunately, he has a set of 4s. River is a jack of hearts, and the dealer quickly goes to muck my hand, but I quickly announce straight.
Straight.
Oh, wow.
What is it? I got you.
Man, 7 dealers at this table and not one even notices the river straight. Good save. 10 hands later, we pick up King King again and shove over an undergun raise to 19k, and he just folds. Hand 203, we open to 20,000 at 4k, 8k, and big blind defends. Flop is Queen 7-6, and I think I'm okay with checking this hand back sometimes. Turn is an 8, and we check back once again. River is a queen, and my opponent checks once more, and I decide to go for value at this point, as I'm very confident that a 7 is the best hand, and he would easily look me up with some ace highs, a 6, a lower 7, or low pocket pairs given my line. I bet 22k and he snap calls, and I show him my hand and he quickly mucks. Hand 209, there's a cutoff limp, and we complete the small blind with 7-8 and go to a flop with the big blind. Flop comes 9-7-6 with 2 spades. We don't have a spade and we check, and big blind leads out for 10k. Cutoff folds, and I have a pretty standard call here. Turn is a queen of spades, which completes the flush, and I check, and the big blind bets 20k. She seems like a very straightforward tight player, so with no spade blocker and what's likely to be the worst hand at this point, I decide to make the fold. She tells me that she has king 9 with the king of spades. Hand 216 is the last hand of day 1 before we bag. Button opens to 18k, and he's been fairly active, and I want to re-steal this hand, but they just announced that we'll be playing our last 4 hands of the night. I end up just defending, and the board runs out Queen 3 Jack 3-3, with both of us checking to the river. On the river, I fire out 19k into 48 to try and blow off an ace, but in retrospect, if I had any balls, I should do something like 2x pot here. He's not gonna call. Anyways, this weak line gets snapped off by ace-8 of hearts, and we bag 152,000 chips at the end of day 1. It's time to walk back over to Bellagio Valet, and let's try and channel some run good for day 2. Alright, day 2, there's 82 coming back, and let's be honest, casino employees are all a bunch of donkeys. Let's jump back into it. We go on a long stretch of card dead to start day 2 and bleed down from 152,000 to 132,000 chips before we pick up a bit of chips when we shove Queen Jack small blind versus big blind and get a fold. We reshove Ace King on the button when undergun min raises to 20k and he ends up folding. And we also find an open with Ace Queen under the gun and the whole table folds. Now we've chipped up to 212,000 chips when we look down at King 10 offsuit in the big blind, and under the gun shoves 44,000 all in, and it's back to us. Blinds are 5k, 10k, and it's only 3.5 big blinds to us, so we call and we're up against Ace Jack of diamonds. But unfortunately, we lose this race. We go crazy card dead for 2 orbits, and bleed down to 100,000 where I pick up ace 9 off on the button, and everyone folds to us, giving us the opportunity to shove it all in for about 9 big blinds. Big blind finds ace 8 to call our shove, and we're off to the race again, where he flops an 8, but we flop nut diamond draw, and we get there on the turn and eliminate him. Diamond.
Oh, there it is.
Oh.
Good game, guys.
Trips. Try to teaser. Very next hand, on hand 261, I open ace 5 suited to 25k, and it's just the big blind since we eliminated the small blind, but we take it down. We get a fortunate walk next orbit in the big blind, which is huge with 8-3 off, and then we pick up ace jack off in the small blind on hand 275 with about 12 big blinds. The button min raises, and there really is nothing to do in this spot with 12 bigs in these position but to shove. Unfortunately, we get snap called and we're against ace king of diamonds for our tournament life. The flop has us in awful shape, and with the turn ace, we're drawing pretty much dead to a chop, and that ends our WSOP run. 52nd place for 1321. Can't complain given how rusty I am at both Hold'em as well as tournaments. It was a short day too, and this ended up being the only WSOP event I played this summer, being that I had to deal 5 to 6 days a week during the whole series, which kept me too busy to make videos or play much poker. I thought it'd be fun to also show every hand I played since people might be curious about the nature of making a deepish run in a live tournament. Going over the stats of this tournament, I played 275 hands. You can see I played 16% VPIP, which might be on the tighter side, but I think playing pretty tight in tournaments is correct, as the name of the game is survival and chip preservation. In terms of how we ran card distribution wise, I'd say I ran below average overall. Over 275 hands, I expect about 7 super premium hands like Ace King or Queens or better, and you can see that I only picked up Ace King twice and King King twice, and never even saw Aces or Queens. We ran on par for normal premium hands like 9s through Jacks and Ace Jack Ace Queen type stuff, picking them up 11 times when we should expect about 10. And for just regular pairs, we saw 12 of them when we should expect 16. Not a really important stat, but I was just curious. Here we also look at some positional VPIP, which I'm looking at the stats and they don't really mean much to me, but again, I thought it was kind of interesting to look at. This over here was my longest card death streaks. Patience is also key in tournaments, so it looks like we had a few streaks where we just sat there for 2 full orbits in a row looking like an idiot and just folding. But it's important to realize that these things will happen and not to go looking for trouble with some marginal plays out of boredom. Finally, this last section is my all-in situations, whether it was for my own tournament life or someone else's. One half of these, so that seems pretty average. To win a tournament of this field size, you're going to have to run exceptionally well in all-in spots. Hope you guys enjoyed this video and format. Now that I'm out of dealing season, hopefully I can return to making some more poker content for you guys. And again, thanks for tuning in.